I can't see myself caring about people, as bad as that sounds, on the level that I do, or worrying about people on the level that I do, without going through that experience. My name is Jackson Allison. I'm a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed when I was 8 years old, eight and a half, almost 9. I had lymphoblastic lymphoma. I used to play baseball. I was really a baseball player. My dad's a baseball coach. So I initially found a bump on my head because we'd been playing baseball all day and it got sunburnt, right? And so you saw just like this red mound protruding from the top of my head. So my mom took me to the emergency room, or to med stop, which is basically the emergency room, and they didn't know what it was. So they sent me down to Children's Hospital in LA. They biopsied it, and they told me that, eventually told me that I had been diagnosed with lymphoblastic lymphoma. As an 8-year-old, I didn't really react to it. I kind of reacted like how my mom did and how my dad did. My mom was very strong about it, but my dad was incredibly upset, and so I wasn't really sure whether I was supposed to take strong for the rest of my family or whether I was supposed to be really upset about it. So my parents were separated. They weren't divorced, but they didn't live together, and so it was just me and my mom at home making on road trips. I remember one of the most significant memories I have through the transition is when you start chemo, they tell you you're gonna lose your hair, but nothing really lives up to the experience of waking up in the morning and seeing all the hair that's just on your pillow that's just falling out. So I remember that me and my dad shaved our heads together on the same day because I was so nervous. That's when I realized that this is actually happening, because you look different now than anybody and everybody else around you. There was a point where we lived in the Ronald McDonald House because we were at the hospital so much, and that was right around the corner from the hospital. So it's basically these charity organizations, and they fund living in these communal kind of hotels, I guess, for very, very low prices. It was very interesting because, when you're 8 years old and then, you're homeschooled for a while and you don't really grow up with friends that aren't outside of the hospital, or your friends that you grow up with are nurses or doctors, it's a much different way to grow up, and you don't really realize that you're a different kid or that there's anything wrong necessarily until you go back into the real world. I was under the impression that when Make-A-Wish came, this is going to sound really bad to begin with, that it was for kids who were going through treatment that were at a huge probability of passing away. So they come in, they send 2 representatives. I remember the name of one, his name was Greg. Greg asked me what I like to do. And I said, I'm on treatment, so all I used to do really during treatment was do homeschooling, go to the hospital and get chemo, and play my violin. So we had this concert, I played in the youth symphony, and we had this concert, and it was called Pop by the Sea. It was something along those lines. And so we'd play music from famous movies, and so what I played him, I'm pretty positive, was the Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack. They got together and contacted a man named Jim Wimmer, who is a violin maker in Santa Barbara. So he remade a violin from the 1700s, I'm pretty sure, a violin from the 1700s, right, that was made in Czechoslovakia, in Prague, that was burned in a fire, and so half of it was there, and then he reconstructed the other half of it, based on the half that was still there. They gave it to me at a youth symphony concert. So we were playing, and I remember looking at the playbill, right, and seeing, this group is playing, and then this group is playing, and then the orchestra's playing. I'm okay, I'm up next. These people walk out with a violin case. I'm okay, this is a little weird, right? Then this woman who I'd never seen before, grabs the mic, and she says something about the Make-A-Wish Foundation. They said my name, and I was part of me was still questioning what was going on. And they called me up on stage and they presented that violin to me, on stage at the Performing Arts Center at Cal Poly. Then I played the next song, our last song, on that violin. When I was going through treatment, it was it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. And you get to this point where you're it's either going to happen now or it's not, right? You feel whatever it was, you can call it death if you want, you can call it the Grim Reaper, whatever you want, came this close to me, or came as close as something could possibly come to, just brushed past you, and decided at the last minute that it wasn't worth taking. When you go to sleep, I truly believe that everybody comes back to the same basic thought, right? They come back to the same thing, whether it's related to something that happened in their day, whether it's related to a certain person or a certain emotion that person's affiliated with. For me, before I go to bed every night, my mind goes back there. You think about what would have happened if things went the other way, or you think about what would have happened if you're back in that situation again today. But at the same time, it does make you a stronger person. You know, it makes you stronger because, you know, you live your everyday life with the experience of knowing that you did come into contact with this thing. And it makes you like really take advantage of the time you do have. You know, whether it's because you're scared it's gonna come back at some point, or whether it's because you feel like you're here for a reason now, or you like have a purpose to be here. I think like the biggest thing that I came out learning is that if people can like care that much about you, then you can care that much about everybody around you. And you can care more about everybody around you. That's the biggest thing that I came out of the experience, knowing 100% for sure that there was like a reason to care about everybody around you.